Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am Bill Oram, joined as always every single week and occasionally on press row behind Jalen Rose, Brenna Green from Coin 6. Brenna,
Hello.
What's up? Hi.
We've had an eventful last 24 hours, haven't we?
You know, it's so funny. The internet is a funny and weird place.
It is, yeah.
So Brenna, you and I went a little bit viral sitting behind Jalen Rose and the TNT broadcast crew during Oregon's second round loss to Arizona. Terrific game in Seattle. Wonderful experience at Climate Pledge Arena. First time I'd covered a game there. And if you were watching in the final minute, you would have seen Brenna and I engage in a very expressive conversation. And a lot of theories out there on the internet about what we were talking about. And where are my lip readers at, Brenna? Where are my lip readers at?
Because it's very obvious what we were both saying.
Because we just happened to be having a conversation at that time, unaware that the camera was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
About this podcast, the Oregonian Sports Podcast.
Yep, the Oregonian Sports Podcast. You say it, and then I say it back to you.
But
and it's truly incredible, by the way, that they took us right at that moment, because we'd been acting up for like a solid 30 seconds before.
Sure.
But we hadn't said the podcast yet.
Yep.
And then they took us right as we said. So
it's so funny. It's so funny. I will say that this experience has led to me being called a Riz God, which was a first for me. Now, granted, it was by colleague Ryan Clark, who was explaining to me what was happening on the internet, and he said, "You are what the kids call a Riz God."
Oh my God.
But Riz has been thrown around in the comments a little bit. But this video has been seen by millions of people at this point. And, you know, Brenna, I think you and I both, like, in our professional capacities, have had the experience the misfortune of going viral for different things. Like, I've had some exchanges with LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, that have made the rounds. I think you had some with Mike Leach and probably others that I'm not even thinking of. Nick Rolovich. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And it is just interesting what happens when the internet gets its hooks in you a little bit. And I don't know that we quite reached main character of Twitter status on this one.
Yeah, no.
But
no.
To a certain audience.
Okay, here's like the crazy thing. So yesterday, my best friend from college, she and I hadn't talked in a while, and so I'd FaceTimed her when I was back on Gonzaga's campus, and she didn't pick up, so she called me yesterday. And we're nearing the end of the conversation, and she's like, "Garrett, you know, my fiance is making dinner, so I'm going to go in there and help out making dinner." And she says to Garrett, she's like, "Yeah, I'm talking to Brenna." And Garrett goes, "I have a question for Brenna." And I'm like, "What? Like, what could Garrett possibly have a question for me about?" And then he's like, "I saw Brenna go viral today on Twitter. What was going on?" Like, what? Like, this has reached my best friend's fiance? Like, I didn't even know you had Twitter, bro. Like, what? So yeah, that was I was like, "Oh, okay. So, yeah, this is probably a little bit bigger than I thought." I did get sent an Instagram post today that has 30,000 likes on it, so wasn't aware of that one until this morning. So yeah, there's a few things going on. But yeah,
it was that one too. It's so funny because this thing that was like maybe meant to be like an Easter egg for our producer Kelly Doyle, you know, like watching at home, like they were saying, it's just very, very funny. And yeah, I mean, I've heard from people that I don't typically hear from, who have been like, "Have you seen this? Do you know?" Like, you know, and then they're breaking it down. It's like, what did you in was the confident lean, and I'm like, Jalen was blocking my view. Like, I had to give it a little bit of a lean. Anyway, hilarious.
I mean, great pub for the podcast, right?
I mean,
sure.
I think I've told Kelly to work on a remix of the video where she dubs our voices saying Oregonian Sports Podcast, and then it like turns into like an actual like remix tape to promote the podcast. Also, by the way, really discerning viewers might be able to make out me saying Orem Forum after Oregonian Sports Podcast.
I didn't even make that one out
because I do have this new video series that you can find on Instagram and TikTok called the Orem Forum, where I break down the issues of the day every week. It's super high tech. I stand in front of a whiteboard. Every time we're done recording, I have to write "Do not erase" on the whiteboard in case like the janitors come by and clean the whiteboard. So
Yep.
the Orem Forum also got that much needed pub in the final minute of what was a terrific game, by the way. Which we're going to talk about. We have a lot to talk about on this episode, not just our fleeting appearance in the zeitgeist, but also obviously the Ducks, the end of the Ducks run,
viral fame,
the end of the Ducks run in the NCAA tournament, yet another near miss in a Sweet 16. Oregon State still has the opportunity to play in a tournament in Las Vegas coming up next week, but they're going to be without some of their key players because the transfer portal has already hit the Beavers hard. And we'll have an update on the Portland Diamond Project and probably find our way into some other topics as well. But Brenna, when you weren't enjoying yourself on press row, what were your takeaways from? Now, granted, we've talked about, I know you were covering everything, the whole shebang in Seattle. And so there was a lot on your plate, but specific to the Oregon weekend, right? I mean, yes. Liberty, if there's thoughts on the Liberty blowout, fine, but specifically that Oregon-Arizona game, which was just outstanding. What did you come away from the weekend thinking about the Ducks?
The overall sense I had about this team is this was kind of a team that would be lucky if they made the Sweet 16. So the fact that they bowed out when they did was not surprising to me, and kind of made all the sense in the world. I was like, yeah, this is going to be this adds up. This makes sense. They've had some really hot moments. They've had some really cold moments this year. And they just weren't a team that I had a lot of confidence in past a round of 32 wins. So, and I mean, if they would have won, they would have been shipped off to Newark to play Cooper Flag. Like, that's not an advantageous situation, to say the least. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things because, like, I felt the same way, right? Like that they'd go to the Sweet 16 and they would almost certainly get pasted. So there was sort of an element of like, at least in my mind, like detached from the team, right? Not as a fan. Like, do they even want to go to Newark to play Duke? And that is so like antithetical to sports. And like, as long as you're in the tournament, you have a chance. So of course you do.
Yeah.
But like, is it better to go out on the high note of like, really, a great finish against Arizona where you certainly could have won in the round of 32, or to reach the Sweet 16 and say you reach the Sweet 16 and then, just basically get swatted out of the tournament like a Barry Bonds home run. Like, it's better to get to the Sweet 16, I think, unequivocally, but I probably leave the season with better feelings about the Ducks the way they went out, and the quality of this team than if they lost by 25 in Newark and were non-competitive against Duke. And maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. Maybe they would have been more competitive than we think they're going to be. The Arizona game is going to be really interesting, but that's sort of my view on it.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I mean, the overarching feeling I had after that game was, they didn't give up, which I think is something they could have very easily done. They could have easily thrown the towel in and been like, all right, well, because Arizona was on one midway through that second half, and it was not looking very pretty. So the fact that they even made it a game at the end, I thought was really was a good sign. Now, you look at the players out on that court. How many are going to be back next year? We know Bamba's gone. Mm-hmm. We know Angel's gone. He didn't have a very good game.
Boy, for somebody who started the game hot, like had the Ducks' first two buckets, like had the dunk and the three, and you're like, oh, Brandon Angel, X factor in this game. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and then went completely quiet the rest of the time. I mean, completely quiet, bizarre. Um, and then, you just look at the portal and you just don't know what's going to happen here with this team. You just really don't know what's going to happen. I could see it being a situation where not too many people leave, and I could see it being a situation where it's a mass exodus.
Mookie Cook is already gone, which, I think everybody anticipated, but
yeah,
he was in the portal the morning after the game.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think really matters for the Ducks in the transfer portal is retaining Nate Biddle with that extra year of eligibility and Jackson Shellstat. I think you can work with any other combination of, whatever might happen. And I will say, and listen, I've been surprised before by the transfer portal, but I just don't see either of those guys leaving. And I don't see anybody paying either of those guys more than Oregon will pay them. Unless, I don't know. I understand that there are schools that have better collectives that are more focused on basketball than Oregon. Oregon's collective is primarily built for football. But when you're talking about, and maybe this is just an old school way of thinking, but you're talking about two guys who, grew up in the state, who grew up, watching the Ducks go to, the NCAA tournament, who have been part of some really good Ducks teams, but haven't yet broken through. I just can't really intellectually justify either of them leaving unless there's just a huge pile of money out there. And I'm not ruling that out, obviously. But I guess I assume they're going to be back because that's what makes sense. But you should take nothing for granted in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, and if I were to really I think it through, if I were to, I would imagine Nate to be back more quickly than Jackson, just because of the fact that Jackson is young.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a program out there, you're I get 2 years with this kid.
Yeah.
So that is, something to really think about as well. So,
but where is he go? Where is he going to go that he's going to feel better about the situation than he does at Oregon? The offense is built around him. He has an incredible amount of freedom. He plays in the Big Ten. He's already, playing at an All-American level. Where is it going to get dramatically better for him? I think it's a really small number of schools. I think you're talking about the the Duke, Carolina, I think you're talking about that tier of
Kansas.
school.
Yeah.
Kansas. But let's say Texas came in with a boatload of money. Is he going to Texas? That doesn't seem that feels somewhat lateral. Maybe marginally better, but and also Texas is going to hire a new coach. Who knows? But Houston, right? It's is he going to pack up and move to Houston, Texas, when he's already got a great situation here? That to me would be the sort of thing that would mean that college sports are already pretty jacked up. But that would be kind of the ultimate jump the shark moment of NIL and the transfer portal for me. When you've got a guy who has the world at his fingertips, is the leader and star of a team that is right there.
Mm-hmm.
The coach he recruited him, and has helped develop him from, has brought him along, gave him incredible autonomy as a true freshman. The trust is there. Again, I'm just making this is all the reasons I just cannot really see him leaving. But like I said, you can't rule anything out in this day and age. But I think it's a relatively small number of schools.
Yeah.
Does UCLA move the needle if they come in and are we want you to be the face of UCLA basketball? I don't know. It doesn't seem like a fit. You're gonna say Gonzaga, aren't you? The Zags.
No.
Okay. Oh, sorry. See, I'm so warped.
I actually have thought about that, but I also it's an interesting situation up there because they redshirted a point guard this year to basically be kind of the next person after Ryan Nembhard, so who transferred in. So, but has the thought crossed my mind? Yeah, I think Jackson's kind of a run and gun point guard, and that is a offense that is a little bit more free flowing in terms of that.
I've spent some time thinking about how good he would look in a Montana Grizzlies uniform as well.
I'm sure you have. You have.
Travis DeCure, I'm sure, is working the phones on that one right now.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure all the money bags in Missoula are just throwing it at Jackson Shellstat. How would you like to have 40 points every game? So yeah, no, that is something that I've thought about. But Yeah, there's a few places that I don't see him. There's a lot of places I don't see him going. Let's put it that way.
Let's talk about the end of that game in
Yeah.
Seattle, because obviously the Ducks really had to grind to get back into it. They finally started getting to Biddle in the post. I am completely on board with the strategy of fouling up 3. Completely on board,
Yep.
especially like in a tournament like that.
Yep.
But man, as a viewer, I wanted to see Shellstad shoot the ball once. Like that kid has been so clutch this year on the road in so many situations. Has hit. I mean, he had the game winner against Michigan as a freshman. Like that guy has like really. And I'm repeating talking points that I had going into the tournament, but I think that it's held up. Like he has been just absolute nails in the clutch for the Ducks, really his entire career there. And it felt like he was kind of waiting for like a March Madness moment, and maybe he had it a little bit against Liberty because he obviously went off against Liberty. Had a great game in the blowout against the Flames, but like I just felt like that game was set up for him to get a game tying 3. And shout out to Tommy Lloyd. Like I get it intellectually, I'm fine with it. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's smart basketball, but it does bum me out. And I also am like, I mean, college generally is little more, has less latitude on the intentional foul than the NBA. It's like you've got to sell it as an actual foul a little more in college. I also didn't think Arizona did a great job of that. Like I thought you could have made a case for an intentional foul call, which would have obviously like led to an absolute melee in the stands probably. The other one was that, I mean, by the letter of the law, like on the last time he was fouled, like he anticipated the foul and he hucked a shot from half court. Like I thought he was in the process of shooting. I would have given him free throws there, but I'm also looking at this from the standpoint of like I wanted to see this game keep going and go to overtime. So I thought either of those things conceivably could have been justified. I think those would have been hard calls to make in the moment, but I was very disappointed that we did not get to see Arizona D up and Oregon try to tie that game.
Yeah, no, I it was one of those things where, by the way, that game was almost done too at one point when Arizona got on a fast break and they fouled the tall guy. I can't even try to pronounce his name.
And then he missed 2 free throws.
If he would have made that, the game was over. I mean, I literally, as he was coming down the court, I go, game over. And then that's how it all transpired. So
was that the second review? Because like after the second missed free throw, the ball went out of bounds and they called it off Biddle and it looked like it was going to come back the other way, that Biddle didn't touch it. And then after review, they kept it with Arizona? Or am I getting my wires crossed on those?
I think you're getting your wires crossed there. But it's all a fever dream at this point because all we were thinking about was the Oregonian Sports
Podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, it's.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, granted, of course, we would not have done this intentionally because that would have been an abuse of our access and our seats.
Yes,
we would like to. I would not want to. I would not be sitting up there holding up a sign that says Oregonian Sports Podcast. Like, I mean, the NCAA can take my credential away. So, like, I want to be very clear that this was pure happenstance that we were having a conversation about the Oregonian Sports Podcast at that moment. But the fact that we were talking about the Oregonian Sports Podcast at that moment, what do you think that free advertising is worth to the Oregonian and Advanced Local in terms of advertising? Because if you could have advertising in that exact moment of a down to the wire March Madness game in prime time, that's millions and millions of dollars in exposure for the company, and should probably be reflected in our next paychecks.
Obviously.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, because I mean, everyone.
Publisher John Maher, are you listening to this?
Because as you can see on Twitter and Instagram, everyone could tell that we were saying Oregonian Sports Podcast.
Well, which is what they're going to know when we finally post this episode directly underneath that one tweet that has gone viral. But I do hate the idea that it's going to ruin everybody's like the truth often shatters, like reality shatters imagination. Like I feel a little bad that people's like creativity is going to be brought back to earth by the reality that we're simply talking about the Oregonian Sports Podcast.
Are you upset about the fact that you're going to lose your Riz God status?
I don't think I'm losing Riz God status because, the mustache went viral. People were very impressed by the mustache, and the mustache is still here. It's still a part of what we've got going on. So I think that, the legend will only grow.
All right, to wrap this up, Oregon, we're happy that, good for them for putting up a fight in that game when they could have not done that. They could have just let it go. They could have let the mouse go, and they did not do that. But, this kind of felt like kind of the understandable fate for this team. So nobody's really upset that they lost in the round that they did. It kind of all was like, yep, that checks out.
Yeah, I mean, they could have won. They could have gone to the Sweet 16. I picked them to go to the Sweet 16 in the Orem Forum last week, but knowing that it was going to be a close game, gave them a slight edge because I thought Oregon had a little bit more depth and a little more balance. And I thought they might have a little bit more of an answer for Caleb Love, just given the familiarity they have with him from last year.
They didn't have an answer for him last year in Eugene.
No, but no. I mean, that, of course. But, they got by Arizona in the Pac-12 tournament last year. And so the idea that, familiarity breeds some level of confidence, thought that, they might be able to neutralize him a little bit. And, boy, he got going in the second half and really, talk about a tournament moment. I mean, Caleb Love was terrific.
Yep.
So we've touched on the transfer portal for the Ducks. Certainly questions about a lot of those guys. It's so interesting because you can hear players say, hey, I'm coming back. In the setting like at the NCAA tournament, like Jadrian Tracy said, coming back, and he very well may. I'm not saying that he's being dishonest, but one, what else is he going to say in that moment? And two, a lot of these guys need to take a beat. The season ends, you start talking to your family, you start talking to the people around you, you see what opportunities are out there, and circumstances change. I mean, Nate King said after the elimination in the WCC tournament that he was coming back for Oregon State. Well, what happens today? Today being Wednesday, Nate Kings is in the transfer portal, joining DeJon Craig and Michael Rataj from Oregon State. They will not be playing in the Crown is it the Crown tournament in Las Vegas? It's like, people seem kind of excited about this, by the way. It is not just from an Oregon State standpoint, but in terms of as a secondary postseason opportunity, seems like it might be supplanting the NIT a little bit, just because NIT home sites, it's lost a lot of luster due to the transfer portal, and whereas this brings teams together in Vegas for a tournament, seems like there's a chance for this to be kind of an interesting thing going forward. If any secondary tournament can be interesting. So that will be something to follow. But the Beavers, are already going to be without two starters. Michael Rataj, was all conference forward for the Beavs. He's going to make a killing he's going to make a killing in NIL. Nate Kings is going to do very well in NIL. And, who knows what happens with the rest of those guys. I mean, the Beavers have some other players who, they really can't afford to lose. And it feels like a lot of that is out of their control because the Beavers only have what they have to offer these guys. I think their collective has done a good job of kind of licking its wounds and getting a little more aggressive on some of these players. And I think the offers have been a lot better. But, you still can't compete with, Power 4 programs that come in with, high 6 figures or 7-figure offers. I mean, that just doesn't exist in Corvallis right now, even for a player like Michael Rataj, who's, again, awesome. I mean, he's really, really good, and he's been really good for them for several years. He has, he fought through a medical condition there. He was the guy who stuck around last year when virtually everyone else left in the transfer portal. Jordan Pope, Tyler Bilodeau, But I think that what we have to do is sort of move past this notion of loyalty in college sports, because I don't really think it's a reflection on the player or the individual if they leave. And I do appreciate hearing from coaches who get that and will explain that. And I thought Dana Altman did a great job after the game in Seattle, where he said, I love each and every one of these guys. I want them to be here. I want them here. We want to continue to work with them and develop them. But if for some reason they don't think this is the right place, or they don't think I'm the right guy, then like I want them to go where they are going to be happier. And I think that that's like I don't know how else you can really land on this issue other than this is the way that the sport is structured. This is what the conferences, everybody who makes this decision has wanted to create. And yes, there is unfortunate impact and fallout on programs, but if the goal is to empower the player, like all you can do as a coach and all you can do as a fan base is hope that you have a coach that has created an environment that is going to entice players to stay, and that you have an NIL structure that is going to be able to make it financially feasible for them to stay. Because I think you look at like the Oregon State women last year, I don't think that a lot of those players wanted to leave Oregon State.
Yeah.
Like Talia is an interesting one because she'd graduated, she had put 4 years into the program, she had a 5th year, opportunity to go play for a number 1 caliber team is very, very enticing. So I get that. And so once she left, things kind of unspooled. But like, I think a lot of those players, especially kind of like the role players from that team, like they absolutely wanted to stay at Oregon State. But once it becomes, the competitive advantage you had, goes away, and the financial incentive isn't the same, you almost can't justify staying. And so the idea that fans take it personally or make it about loyalty, it's like, I don't know, in a lot of these situations, I don't know what else they're supposed to do, especially when you're talking about athletes who, may not be able to make tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars playing basketball beyond college. Some of those players are going to reach the WNBA, but not all. May have opportunities to play overseas and internationally, but like, if you are in your early 20s or teens and playing college sports, and there's now a system that allows you to maximize your worth financially, like how could you not do that? I mean, if I'd been offered $50,000 to transfer to Montana State to be the sports editor of the student newspaper of Montana State, I would have done that despite my like loyalty to the University of Montana, because that's real money. And like with college athletes, you're talking about real money. So I just can't begrudge these athletes, even though I have real empathy for the programs they leave behind. And with Oregon State, sorry to ramble, but with Oregon State, I thought Wayne Tinkle did a terrific job of recovering last year. He went and found guys who, could come in and contribute right away. Like I thought he built out a roster that like, they got obviously, 20 plus win season for the first time in several years. Were competitive in the WCC, had a win against Gonzaga. Had a case for the, obviously they're still playing, right? So, I mean, but the idea that you have to do that every single year, if you're kind of one of the have-nots in college sports, it's just exhausting to think about, let alone do.
Yeah, it was interesting while you were talking, because this is not going to be super relevant to our listeners, but I do think it's still interesting. There's Gonzaga drink. There's a guy who used to be an assistant coach at Gonzaga who's now the head coach at Valpo. His name's Roger Powell. And Roger, I'm trying to find the tweet right now that he said to somebody, but like he basically said, okay, yeah, we say like it was about one of the players transferring. He said, "We thank you and we build. We say thank you and build. The new college basketball. Can't waste time complaining. Develop and move on to the next one. No one knew my guys before this year, and now everyone wants them. Our developmental and opportunity did that." And then also a few days later, one of the kids that he that is transferring, like there was a graphic put out on Instagram of all the schools that have contacted this kid or whatever, and Roger shared it on his Instagram story, like about one of his kids getting all these opportunities from other schools. Like, this is the reality of what's next. You can try to fight it as much as you want, and I get that, but you're going to end up benefiting a lot more if you take the the path that Roger's taking right now, going, this is the reality. This is my reality. And the reality is this. You put together a team, guys move on. You hope that other players see that you have been able to do that. You get better people and you keep kind of building and building and building until you strike gold and make an NCAA tournament. And then hopefully you get hired by a bigger school and hopefully have a little bit more stability. But that is just the reality of what it is to be a coach and, quite honestly, be a fan base in college basketball right now. And I know that is not what people want to hear, but either you're going to have Roger's perspective on all of it, or you're going to completely flounder in the negativity. So that's just the reality of what it is. And I know, like, you know, if you're an Oregon State men's basketball fan, that's not what you want to hear. That's just not what you want to hear. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon State basketball, operated, as a high major, for most of its history, and maybe didn't succeed as a high major for, most of the last 30 years. But I mean, there's a great tradition at Oregon State, a tradition of NCAA tournaments and putting players in the pros. And, that right now is, they're operating more like a mid-major. And and that is a difficult reality to adjust to. And who else operates like Roger Powell, like you're talking about, who that is really reminiscent of, and I'm sure there's others, but like that is exactly the approach that Jason Eck took at the University of Idaho, because and Jason Eck has since gone on to New Mexico State as a football coach there. But in his time at Idaho, I wouldn't be surprised if he talks the same way at New Mexico State, by the way, because New Mexico State is not. I would
absolutely imagine he does.
It's not a destination in the transfer portal, right? They're not going to have a great NIL budget. But what he did at Idaho was, and the way he talked about Giovanni McCoy, right, when he left Idaho. I mean, Jason Eck would pick up the phone and talk to anybody about Giovanni McCoy, even though he left Idaho to go to Oregon State, because the approach he's had to take is come here, get noticed, put up numbers, get better, and then go get paid. And I don't think. Development program probably isn't what like fans want to hear.
Yep.
But what is your path to getting good players? Like, make the pitch to them that, they could go sit on the back of the bench at Oregon State as a walk-on, or, as a scholarship player who's not going to play, or come here for a year, put up numbers, and then next year we'll get you back to Oregon State. I'm just using the Beavers as an example, and we'll get you like some real, like, we'll put you in a position where you're gonna have the opportunity to earn some money and have some competitive offers. I mean, there's a real argument for kind of your mid-level recruits to go that path, and take advantage of the opportunities that exist at the FCS level, or in basketball the mid-major level, or the group of 5 level in football, like at New Mexico State, and then parlay that into a bigger opportunity. And I'm sure those are conversations that coaches across the country are having, and that parents are having, and agents are having. And I think what again is interesting about Oregon State is like they're kind of in between those two things. Where like Oregon State has too many resources to function as like a development program. I'm talking about basketball, but also is probably not going to be a destination for guys who are ready to take that next jump. Like they're going to have to kind of catch the guys who are kind of in between, looking to make a jump but aren't going to get to that that Power 4 level. So just and again, I think Wayne Tinkle did a really good job last year in terms of navigating that and getting the right kinds of guys. So I'll be really interested to see what he does this year once the dust settles and we know exactly how many players are leaving.
Yeah.
And by the way, he went super international last year. And, I think there is a hope that, players who come from overseas have been, in the club program for their whole lives, basically, and have, the club system and have kind of the approach of spending a long time and building through a system. And so I think there's a hope too that will be something that that Oregon State can benefit from. Transfer over, and also something a lot of WCC programs have succeeded with over the years as well. But that's
before we move on from college basketball, I do want to just make one note. A lot of people were upset about the UP women not making the NCAA tournament.
Let's dig into this. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I always thought to myself, I understand it. I knew they were never going to make it. There was just no way. I'm sorry. The WCC was not viewed as a conference that was strong enough to have two teams in it, two teams in the NCAA tournament. And boy, sometimes your greatest blessing is not getting what you want. And I understand you want to go to the NCAA tournament, you want to experience it, all that good stuff. But obviously, we've seen what happened the last 2 years. We're seeing what's happening in this year's NCAA tournament, both on the men's and women's side, by the way. I mean, it is just a
chalk fest.
Chalk fest, yes, a great way to put it. I do not think the UP women would have been able to upset somebody, and they would have gone in as, an Oregon State 14 seed. And I don't see them even bumping up to the 13 line. And they would have just got bounced. So, and now they're in the quarterfinals of the WBIT, which, by the way, Gonzaga women are in as well on the opposite side of the bracket. So, hey, the WCC, not that bad. I think that there's something to be said right now about the fact that as somebody who's pretty close with this team, who, has done a lot of sideline reporting with this squad, it's this team that really, really gets along with each other. And although it's great to make the NCAA tournament, I think getting way more games together like this is quite honestly better.
Yeah.
It's better. So that's very exciting for them. And they play again tomorrow. So
think about like program building, and I know this is not a year that Stanford has been. I mean, Stanford's not been very good this year.
No.
I mean, they barely have a winning record. First year post Tara, there's going to be some growing pains there. But to be the University of Portland Pilots and to go on the road and beat Stanford in Maples Pavilion, even in the WBIT, is a signature win for Mike Meek and the Pilots program. And like you're in the quarterfinals now of this tournament, playing Villanova. It's like that is so. I agree, and this is kind of to the point the conversation we were having earlier about the Ducks men in the Sweet 16 versus the round of 32.
Yep.
This is great experience for the Pilots. It's great visibility for the Pilots. It's great. I mean, in addition, like this is the same thing you hear, coaches talk about like bowl season. It's practice time. It's time together as a team. Like this, parlays well for the future if you can keep your team together. But also giving your players the opportunity to play for something and to keep playing later into the year is the sort of thing that feels like it will help keep your team together. And I don't know. I mean, I think, obviously the Pilots have done a great job of getting through the WCC tournament the last few years. I mean, they've played for the title the last 3 years, gone to the NCAA tournament twice. I mean, there's nothing like the NCAA tournament, but I really do think there's real value to this. And so they've beaten Stanford, they've beaten Seton Hall, they'll play Villanova. Like, it's, good exposure. These are, big time universities and programs that they're playing and beating. I think if I was, I think honestly, you would take this over losing by 25 in the NCAA tournament. And by the way, I'm glad you pivoted toward the women's side just real quick, because the Oregon women we talked about last week, and I know you'd said that you were a little disappointed in them just because of the way they finished the regular season and the Big Ten tournament. They had a very drama-filled NCAA tournament where they built a big lead against Vanderbilt, then they end up going to overtime, maybe should have lost, end up winning. Then they play Duke, and play Duke way tougher than anybody would have expected, have a lead at halftime. Deja Kelly was just ice in her veins, Deja Kelly. And they lose in the round of 32 as well. But I just want to shout out that team for, the fight it showed, and in making a run, and nearly, I mean, maybe they were never going to actually topple Duke in that situation, but they were pretty darn close. And I will say, I mean, man, what a day for Ducks fans. You start the morning with like a nail biter on the women's side, because that was a like 9 a.m. tip on Sunday, and then you end it with, and so, one Ducks fan pointed out to me, and they were right. It was the first game of the day, like
Yep.
in either bracket, was the Oregon Duke women.
Yep.
And then the Oregon Arizona game was the last game of the day. So this great day of college basketball, if you're a Duck fan, was bracketed by your two teams losing in like heartbreaking dramatic fashion. So, yeah, I mean, condolences to Ducks fans who rode that roller coaster, from the time they woke up until the time they went to sleep. I mean, starting with like coffee and ending with cocktails probably. But that's why March Madness is fun, guys. Like, that's great. It's great theater, even if neither of those results went the way of our listeners.
Ginormous accomplishment for the Oregon women to win a game in the tournament. Ginormous. And that was 10-7, whatever. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Especially after the last few years. I mean, it's been tough sledding down there in Eugene for the women's program. So, this is kind of the start of hopefully something bigger for them. So we'll see what happens. It was nice to see, I obviously go way back with Kelly. So, Gonzaga, drink. We're just doing all the Gonzaga references today, but it makes sense. We're talking a lot about college basketball. Anyways,
we haven't really acknowledged that the Gonzaga men didn't make it past the first weekend, but that's fine.
They did not. But once again, you know what? Them and Oregon, extremely proud of how they handled themselves in those games. Because the Gonzaga men were in the same situation as the Oregon men were.
Yeah.
Where it was like, man, it might be throwing the towel time, and they did not do that. So, I feel those games are very eerily similar to me in terms of that general storyline. The fact that they were able to, make this turn and just seeing Kelly, Kelly really does look refreshed. And I think that is a huge, huge, huge win for everyone down there. And, we'll see how it all goes. But, generally the state of women's basketball in our state is pretty decent right now. I mean, you've got those 3 D1 programs in, tournament contention. They're very good. And I think that is a really, really exciting thing if you're a women's basketball fan, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this. Did you see this? That lovely Best at Tualatin got invited to a Team USA camp at the Final Four.
I did not see that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for her. She was a delight to watch in the 6A tournament. And
yeah.
Obviously we talked about the passing of the torch in 6A girls hoops last week with Jazzy Davidson's career coming to an end and lovely Best kind of assuming that mantle or with 3 years to go, presumably. So that's cool. That's awesome.
And this is another passing of the torch because Jazzy participated in this camp as well, I believe, last year. So
give it a few years. We'll see her at Hoop Summit.
45 athletes will participate in the U.S. Basketball Women's Junior National Team Minicamp. And there you go. Lovely Best is one of them. So really exciting stuff there. It's just nice to see her getting rewarded. So there you go. There's our Oregon Women's Basketball Corner, brought to you by sponsor us.
I want there to be theme music for the special report on Oregon women's basketball.
Yes,
by Brenna Green.
Mm-hmm.
So driving back from Seattle on Monday morning, I tuned into. How do I make this sound like I wasn't being an unsafe driver? I was streaming there was a Senate hearing in Salem, the Senate Committee on Finance, I believe, heard from the Portland Diamond Project. And I've been kind of monitoring this Portland Diamond Project thing for the last few weeks. I had it on in my car, but I wasn't watching. I was listening. But this was where they kind of formally made their formal ask of the legislature for the $800 million that I've been talking about them coming for. It was introduced as legislation by Senator Mark Meek, Democrat from Gladstone. I don't know if there's a relation, Brenna, to Mike Meek, but I'll find out. If any of our listeners know if Senator Mark Meek is related to University of Portland Pilots women's head coach Mike Meek, let us know. But I tuned in to kind of see what some of the new info on this was, because obviously we knew the number, we more or less understand the bonding mechanism that would provide the funds. I think some of the things that were clarified for me in this were that if something were to go sideways once the ballpark was built, before the bonds were repaid, let's say the team moved, right? Like, so let's say the team moves, the players who were providing the revenue in terms of taxable income go play elsewhere, and there aren't professional baseball players to repay the $800 million in bonds. Who's on the hook for that? Is it Oregon taxpayers? Is it, well, so the answer that came out of this hearing, and I think is important to note, was it would be the team itself, like team ownership and the stadium authority that is going to be created to operate the stadium. So that's one of the things that people have been asking me, who would carry the liability on these bonds in case something goes wrong and there isn't this income to tax to repay. I thought that was an important distinction. There were absolutely a couple of opponents of this who came in, but I think that there seem to be two conversations happening. And one of them is whether this mechanism should be employed to help build a stadium, and whether a baseball stadium / team is actually a good idea for Portland. Because, the question of, the economic development isn't there to the degree that the Diamond Project and its advocates say it is somewhat different from I think that the legislature and the kind of leadership in key positions seems to be pretty much in agreement that this would be a good thing for Oregon. So if you agree that getting another professional sports team, of the big four sports, having a waterfront or even just, a metropolitan stadium that could be multi-use in the rest of the year, that has 81, games a year, in addition to, multi-use the rest of the year, is a good thing for Portland, then really it just becomes a question of whether the bonding mechanism is a good use of public resources. And again, I'm not trying to be like a shill for the Diamond Project, but I just feel like I hear so many times I get like people saying, well, no public funds. It's not public funds. It is, at this point, speculative revenue from the income of baseball players and team employees. And there are like some, I think there are some real arguments against it that I'm still trying to understand. And I think, the question of whether this even pencils out, if you would generate enough tax revenue over those 30 years to pay back $800 million is something that needs to be closely scrutinized, and not just with the Diamond Project saying, yeah, of course it's going to pencil. Like, I mean, obviously there need to be independent studies on that, and there are watchdog groups that have looked at it and said it's going to be kind of close. And especially you don't know what's going to happen with baseball salaries over the next 30 years. The baseball TV contract is changing. ESPN just let it go. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions about baseball, but the fact that baseball is expanding, or is at least planning to expand, does paint a pretty like upward trajectory for the sport, even though maybe the audience isn't what it was previously. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any new questions on this subject, but it's something that we're kind of continuously monitoring here. And I did think, like I said, the biggest thing that came out of it was, to me, that the liability would not be on the taxpayers if something went wrong. Because that's not impossible to conceive of a situation where, the value of baseball teams goes way down, and so salaries, decrease. I have a harder time seeing a team leaving Portland if it came, simply because like teams leave because they can't get funding for new stadiums, or because, like you'd be talking about it, they would have a brand new stadium on if those renderings are even close to what it would look like, a gorgeous, design, like that would look incredible on television, that people would want to travel to experience. Like, I don't really see the team leaving within the first 3 decades. You don't see that a lot. Like, it's not very often outside of the Vancouver Grizzlies that a team leaves, so soon after inception. But I mean, obviously you would have to have stipulations and allowances for whether that happens, for the event that happened. And I was somewhat encouraged by that fact as well. And I think that there just needs to be a greater understanding, by myself included, of how the actual bonding mechanism works, because it really sounds to me like the state's only obligation here is, I'm not even sure it's the state's. I'm going to withhold that statement, but it does sound like the state's only real obligation here is earmarking the income taxes of players up to $800 million, players and team employees over $50,000, to go back to repay these bonds. That's the state's only obligation, is that if this happens, those taxes up to $800 million go to repay the bonds. So, and then there's questions of, hey, does having a jock tax that impacts, visiting players as well, does that hurt them? Oregon already has, high income tax.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a place where, but the thing is, they're not increasing the income tax on the players. Like, they would pay the same income tax that, other high earners pay. It's just a matter of where it would go. So anyway, off my stump on this subject, but I do think it is just interesting. And by the way, the chorus of people who have spoken out in favor of this is growing. In addition to the mayor of Portland, and obviously the city council at the end of last year spoke out in favor of it. There was also a statement this week from Governor Kotek in a press conference that I'm trying to pull up, but my Outlook is loading very slowly. But just know that now the governor's office has come out in support. Many legislators have come out in support. Obviously the mayor of Portland has been pro. So from a organization standpoint, everybody in power seems to be lining up behind this. And again, that's a different question from, does it actually lead to a baseball team coming? That's a very different question. Here's the quote from Kotek. I'm fully supportive of what the city is trying to do, and I think we have a very unique financing tool that I can support, and I think it is a strong way to finance a stadium so we can have MLB come to Oregon. So, just another voice of support for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think mostly people's grind against this, or whatever you want to call it, is just the fact that I don't think it has so much to do with the financing, because like you said, it's pretty obvious that this is not going to affect you or I. I think it mostly has to do with just being, quite frankly, tired. So
yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes from, and everyone is. There's a lot of people who are tired of being on the Diamond Project's, the Portland Diamond Project's emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
And so people have just hopped off and don't want to see the possibility in it anymore, because they have been hoodwinked a few times.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to invest your emotional capital again and be disappointed again. And because it's happened several times, right? We've seen renderings before, people bought the hats, people bought the shirts, like all of that. And I think that I totally get it. And if this falls through, the people who have kind of gotten excited about it are going to yet again be super disappointed, and understandably so. But I think everything that has happened now is happening now legitimizes all those roller coasters up to this point, because there is something tangible progressing in the halls of power.
I will say this is it. Like,
oh, no question. And by the way, I think if the legislature ends up rejecting this proposal, and I think some version of it's going to get through. And by the way, the original SB5 back in 2003 had a component that was also going to, however it was worded, it was going to create $100 million for public schools as well. And so the author of the original, one of the co-authors of the original SB5, appeared on in that hearing on Monday, and he came out in support, said he could be a resource for the committee. He's a retired law professor from Lewis and Clark, whose name I don't have right in front of me, but he said, hey, I would really, my polite suggestion to the Diamond Project and to lawmakers now would be to write in another $100 million for public schools as well. Utilize the income tax created by this tax revenue to go toward public schools as well. And I think that there's a lot to be said for finding a way to create a rider on this that does benefit the public beyond the development and economic boost that that baseball stadium creates, but like tangibly say, and it's going to help schools, or it's going to help homelessness, or whatever that you end up prioritizing, find a way to make this, help the greater good beyond baseball and the baseball stadium, I think would really help push it over the top. But yes, if this does not get approved in the legislature, I think the whole thing hinges on this.
Yep.
Because, you can find the comments from Rob Manfred where he has said, they want public-private partnerships in these. They want to see that the local government, municipalities, states are invested in the projects, that they want baseball. You're seeing the problem right now in Las Vegas, where John Fisher just unilaterally says, we're moving to Vegas. We've got land. We're funding it ourselves. We're building this stadium. And what do you see? You see the governor or the mayor of Las Vegas come out and say, go back to Oakland. We don't want you here. Like, that is a nightmare scenario for baseball. So I'll be back with another update on the Portland Diamond Project. Sponsor us. Cue dramatic theme music for this segment of the podcast. Brenna, where are you this weekend? What are you doing? I know you're staying on the trail of the NCAA tournament. I will not be by your side behind national television commentators this time. Where are you?
I'm in Spokane. We're covering the women's tournament for a bunch of different stations in our station group. So, up here, I have not yet looked at how psychotic my life is going to be. I am bracing for that currently. So, but I'm gonna live in today and not tomorrow, at least for the next few hours, and then I'm going to have to live in tomorrow. Here we go. We're doing it again. And it'll be interesting. It's very unfortunate that Juju got injured. I was really excited about that. Paige being here, though, will still be super fun. It's, you got Kim Mulkey here with LSU. And you still got stars in USC and UCLA. So it will be a very interesting tournament up here. It's, from what I've been told, pretty close to selling out. Cool. I think it's going to be an insane environment in Spokane. People are going to be really excited about this. And by the way, there's a ginormous volleyball tournament going on here this weekend too. So if downtown Spokane, good luck navigating it. It's going to be crazy here this week. Crazy. They do not have enough hotel rooms for the amount of people that are going to be in this city this week. Period.
That Juju injury was heartbreaking.
Awful.
And I guess it just speaks to the unpredictability of sports and
yep.
the fragileness of of athletes, and we take so many things for granted with players. Juju will obviously be in the Final Four. I'll tune in for the Final Four. You missed that. I feel for Talia von Oelhoffen, by the way, who
yep.
Has taken on a really meaningful role with that USC team. We'll see what ends up happening, but I mean, obviously, that's a local legend whose chance of now winning a national championship is somewhat greatly diminished.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Tamia Gardner's there from Oregon State, as you noted, and so with UCLA,
Reagan Beers with Oklahoma,
and Reagan Beers. I mean, they're all there in Spokane.
They're all here in Spokane.
I might need to come to Spokane and talk to all those guys. Okay,
you may have just hit on a story idea for me.
You're welcome, Coin 6 viewers.
Do you think I hadn't already thought about that weeks ago?
I don't
Jesus,
know.
Come on.
Jesus,
and Donovan Hunter's in the Birmingham regional with TCU. Yep. So all 4 of Oregon State starters in the Sweet 16, which is not going to make Oregon State fans probably feel good.
There it is.
We're back to the transfer portal.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast.
The Oregonian Sports Podcast.
The Oregonian Sports Podcast of international renown, as seen on TNT, the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our new listeners who were so taken by the energy that Brenna and I brought to the Oregon-Arizona broadcast that they just wanted to check out the podcast. We're grateful to have you here. I mean, our obviously our listenership numbers are going to spike by tens of tens. So that's a couple hundred. Okay, Brenna, have fun up there in Spokane, your old stomping grounds. I know that won't be difficult, and we'll look forward to checking in next week before you head to the Final Four. Continue to check out our coverage at Oregon Live and in the Oregonian. Nick Dashiell's been all over the Oregon State transfer situation. and I'll have more on all these topics on the august pages of the Oregonian. Thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends to listen to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Retweet the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Tag your friends, and we will talk to you next week. Exactly 1 hour.